Hello, I'm Manasa. I'm part of the ACJ Alumni Association. We are very, very happy to finally see all of you here at our first ever Alumni Association event. And it's only fitting that we hold it in the memory of dear Bindu Bhaskar ma'am. So we're very happy to have all of you here. I hope more people would walk in later. I would like to start with introducing my fellow association member, Anirudh Madhav. He's just going to come in and tell you a little bit about the panel that we're going to have today about women shaping journalism in India.
Thank you, Manasa. Joining us on today's panel, we have the moderator, Harsha Subramaniam. Yeah. So Harsha belongs to the first batch of ACJ Chennai. He heads content strategy for Meta's global efforts in building the creator economy. Before this, he served as the head of news partnerships for Meta in India since 2019, where he led Instagram and Facebook's engagement with India's news industry on video production, monetization, fighting misinformation, and training efforts. Earlier, Harsha led Bloomberg Media in India as its executive producer for nearly a decade. Since 2010, he was responsible for the creation of Bloomberg's digital and multi-platform partnership in India, Bloomberg Quint. In his journalistic career, spanning 2 decades, Harsha has closely chronicled the economic and political changes in India and has interviewed many thought leaders in business, finance, and politics. He has reported, hosted, and produced live business news for Bloomberg from Mumbai, New York, London, and Hong Kong. Previously, Harsha was CNBC TV18's editor for news, overseeing the channel's primetime programming and co-hosted its most watched daily business news show, India Business Hour. Next up, we have Danya Rajendran. Danya belongs to the 2003 batch of ACJ. She is a co-founder and editor-in-chief of the News Minute, a digital publication that covers South India. In a journalism career spanning 20 years, Danya has a body of work focusing on politics, human rights, gender-based violence, and disaster coverage. Danya was the recipient of the Chameli Devi Jain Award for the Best Women Journalist of India in 2022. She is the recipient of the Reading Journalist of the Year 2023 by the Mumbai Press Club. She is the founding chairperson of DigiPub, India's largest association of digital news outlets that has around 100 members, including sites like The Wire, Scroll, Squint, and News Laundry. Next up, we have Yogita Limaye. Yogita belongs to the 2006 batch of ACJ. She is the BBC's South Asia and Afghanistan correspondent. She is one of the organization's top foreign correspondents and has covered some of the most significant global stories for the network's television, radio, and digital platforms. With extensive experience covering conflict, she reports regularly from Afghanistan and Ukraine. She is BBC's lead correspondent for coverage of events in countries across South Asia. She has done stints in the US, South Korea, and Middle East. Yogita's work in Afghanistan and Ukraine has been nominated for several prestigious awards, including the Emmy and Peabody Awards and the Orwell Prize for Journalism. Prior to joining BBC, she worked for CNN IBN as principal correspondent and anchor. She graduated from the Asian College of Journalism in 2006. Next up, we have Rupa Ramani. Rupa belongs to the 2006 batch of ACJ. She is a seasoned sports journalist and broadcaster with over 18 years of experience in the field. She has worked with prestigious organizations like CNN IBN, now News 18, and Star Sports, beginning her career as a sports reporter and show producer. She has covered many mega sporting events, including Cricket World Cups, Olympics, and Commonwealth Games. Rupa played a key role in producing live cricket matches and shows globally. In 2017, she launched India's first regional sports broadcast channel, Star Sports Tamil. She has been the digital content lead for one of India's Premier League most successful franchises, Chennai Super Kings, for 4 seasons. Currently, Rupa is the sports editor and presenter at First Post, the digital platform of Network 18. Finally, we have Soumya Ashok. Soumya belongs to the 2011 batch of ACJ. She is an independent journalist and long-form writer. She is also the faculty member at Asian College of Journalism, where she teaches feature writing. She has worked as a correspondent for The Hindu, Mint, The Indian Express, and news website The Print. Her work has appeared across several publications, including The Atlantic, South China Morning Post, The Wire, 52.in. She has reported from the US, China, Taiwan, and Sri Lanka. She writes about politics, culture, history, and archaeology. She is working on a first non-fiction book about an archaeological excavation in South India. Yeah. Back to you, Mansa. Thank you.
Thank you, Anirudh. We're very happy all of you are here, and we're very excited to hear you speak. Now, can we have Ranjit Ramanujam? He's the secretary of our Alumni Association, to speak a few words.
Thank you, Manasa. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you again for coming, and that too on time. And like Manasa said, we hope more people join. When we were leaving ACJ, we must have all wanted to come back sooner than we did, I must confess. But then finally, when we decided to have a huddle back here, and as we were preparing to lay the foundation for this organization, which is the ACJ Alumni Association, we had a single goal. That was to foster a community where people help each other while giving back to the great institution that helped shape us and make what we are today. And like you would know, ACJ is global now because alumni is present all across the globe, cutting across domains. It's not just limited to journalism. It's there in media entrepreneurship, tech-driven content creation, etc., and a lot of emerging fields across the globe. So the responsibility of the Alumni Association is also bigger than one would imagine, also because we are living in very interesting times where we are driven by artificial intelligence, data, digital economy, etc. So the predictions about the future might sound unreal at this point in time, but let us all warn ourselves that the objects in the mirror are closer than it appears. And let's admit that. To put things in perspective, you would know that experts say that 99.99% of the innovations that led to the technology that we use today happened in the last 200 years. And if you consider the thesis of the humankind spanning 200,000 years, that is just 0.1% of the entire span of humankind. And that is the level of acceleration that is happening. And Tesla was founded only 22 years ago. And look at the impact that they are already creating in our lives. We should be mindful of that and also be open to using the opportunity. At the same time, we should also know that in the next 4 to 5 years, experts say, the futurists say, that the technology change will happen in such quantum that it will match technology changes that happened in the last 100 years. So we believe that communities like ours, the responsibility is not just to help people cope with the transformation, but also help them continue to lead as some of our alumni around the world do now. And that's a tall order, but then we have no choice but to live up to that. And it is in this context that meetups like these form an important event in the whole scheme of things. We are very happy that we are able to put together this, and we hope that we are starting a wonderful journey where we work together, taking up the challenges that I spoke about a couple of minutes ago. And it's my pleasure to welcome you all, the trustees of the MDF, friends and family of Bindu ma'am, Mr. Balaji is here, thank you for coming. Current and past faculty and the staff of ACJ, the alumni community, friends of ACJ, the media, the students of ACJ, and everyone else gathered here. I hope you have a fantastic evening. Thank you very much for coming.
Now we have Dr. Nalini Rajan, Dean of Studies at ACJ. She's going to pay a tribute to Bindu Bhaskar, ma'am.
Thank you, Manasa. Good evening to everyone. As you know, we are here, gathered here, to pay a tribute to a great friend, long-standing colleague, and a fine teacher, Bindu Bhaskar. Over the years, we've lost a few of our students, and that's always been really devastating for us as teachers. But when a teacher passes away, then a whole knowledge system goes with her, is buried with her. And someone like Bindu Bhaskar was indeed a repository of great knowledge. I remember when I had to write an article on literary journalism, and I was, of course, clueless because I've just dabbled in journalism. I know very little about journalism. And it was Bindu Bhaskar who really helped me. She was a huge help. Apart from that, I mean, she over the years, right from the beginning, she's been here she was here right from the beginning. And when we were in the old building, we would travel in the MRTS back to Adyar. And there were a million topics that we discuss. And in fact, she had so many interests. Among them, she was particularly concerned about the plight of the religious minorities in this country. She was worried about, she used to talk about caste. We used to talk about gender, and it's appropriate that today we have a panel discussion by 4 outstanding alumni who will be discussing women in journalism, and of course, presided over by one outstanding alumnus. When I think of the times that we've spent together, it was largely, funnily enough, largely, while we were in some form of transport, as I mentioned, MRTS was there, but often in her car. And there was much to talk about, so much to talk about, but it wasn't all gloom and doom that we talked about. And I know that for a long time, she was also concerned very much about, she was very, very interested in bridge. She used to talk to me about playing bridge. And I was also wondering if her bridge partners would be here, present here. So she'd talk about it with a great deal of passion. In fact, if I think of one word that characterized Bindu Bhaskar, it was her passion. It was, and certainly, I mean, she made no bones about it. If she was passionate about something, there was no mincing words. She just went about it hammer and tongs if she believed very strongly in something. And when I say that I miss her every working day, it is absolutely no exaggeration, because she was, in the same floor as I. And I saw her every working day. We'd have lunch together very often. We traveled together very often. We went to events very often. So I am very grateful to the Alumni Association for having this event in her memory. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Nalini ma'am. Next, we have Aminul Islam. He's a representative of the SAF Alumni Association. He's also a member of the executive committee. He's from Bangladesh, and he'll be joining us online. He's also going to speak a few words about his memories with Bindu ma'am. Can we please have his video?
Good afternoon, everyone. It was in 2013 when it's more than 12 years ago when I was at the ACJ. I always wanted to go back to the wonderful place, a vibrant institution with diverse souls, culture, and dreams. To the wildest of my dreams, I never thought that I would talk on such an occasion that I am here today. I'm here today with a heavy heart, yet filled with profound gratitude to remember someone who was for more than just a professor and a thesis supervisor to me. I suspect to many of us gathered here today with a SAF scholarship, I joined the classes of the ACJ almost 2 weeks later in 2013. When I arrived, a trauma in my personal life. My English was extremely poor. I was struggling deeply to cope with the academic pace and vibrant cultures on the ACJ campus. Several times I made my mind that I will not complete my study at the ACJ. I'll go back to my country, Bangladesh. But it did not happen. It was because some of the people, like Professor Bindu Bhaskar and Dr. K. Nagaraj and some of my friends. In the meantime, we are required to do a thesis. I was struggling to decide the topic of my thesis. I was assigned to do the work with Professor Bindu Bhaskar by the college authority. When I first walked into the Professor Bindu Bhaskar's office as a nervous student, I had no idea that the brilliant academic would become one of the most influential person in my life. She had this remarkable ability to see the potential in her students that we couldn't see in ourselves. With a gentle smile and often a cup of coffee in her hand, she would listen to my half-formed ideas, not just with passions, but with genuine excitement. I remember a countless afternoons in her office, where what started as a thesis discussion would evolve into deep conversation about life, ethics, and my responsibility as a professional journalist and researcher. She never just taught her subject. She taught me how to think, how to question, most importantly, how to keep our humanity while pursuing the academic and professional excellence. As my thesis supervisor, she had this unique way of teaching and guiding without directing. She would say, I am not here to tell you what you think, but to help you think more clearly about you believe. Those words shaped not just my research, but my entire approach to learning and teaching. What made Professor Bindu Bhaskar extraordinary was how she seamlessly blended academic brilliance with genuine compassion. During my most challenging times with the thesis, when I was ready to give up, she shared her stories of her own struggles as a young journalist and academic. Her vulnerability and honesty made her not just more admirable, but deeply relatable. See, beyond the classroom and the lab, Professor Bindu Bhaskar taught me the importance of the balance between work and life. something rare in academia, even in the field of journalism. She would often say, your research is important, but your learning and academic life is important, but your life is also. She was a mentor who went above and beyond, supported me. She offered guidance and encouragement and listening ear whenever needed. She was also a friend and confident and a source of comfort. With warmth and empathy, made me feel valued and understood. She taught me the importance of compassion, kindness, and respect for others. Today, as I continue my own journey in academia, I find myself asking, what would Professor Bindu Bhaskar do in a challenging situation? When I face any sort of challenging situation, this sort of word comes to my mind. The academic world has lost a brilliant mind. But more importantly, we have lost a mentor, a friend, and a guiding light. Yet I know that the best way to honor her memory is to carry forward her legacy, to be not just good researcher, journalist, but good human being, to mentor others with same passions and with wisdom she showed me. And to remember that the true measure of an academic is not just the publications or in the classroom, but in the life they touch, honestly. Professor Bindu Bhaskar may not longer be with us physically, but her wisdom, kindness, and infectious enthusiasm for learning will continue to inspire generation of journalists in South Asia and the other scholars also like me. As her student and mentee, I can say that while she taught me about our subject matter with exceptional skill, her greatest lesson was showing me how to be a better person. May we honor her memory by living up to the potential she showed in each of us and by passing on to thoughts of knowledge and compassion to that she carried brilliantly. Thank you, Professor, for everything. You will be deeply missed, but never forgotten. Thank you very much.
Next, can we have Mr. Sashi Kumar, Chairman of ACJ?
I don't think we could have had a more fitting formal start to the Alumni Association than this Remembrance event, where we are able to think again and remember the wonderful days when Bindu Bhaskar was with us. A college is about teachers and students, and I have had no doubt ever in my mind that the teachers of ACJ are its pillars, who even hold this building up there upright. And Bindu was one of the tallest pillars of ACJ. Nalini has evoked the essential Bindu on this occasion, her passion, her deep concern for every individual student, her doggedness and stout defense of students. I would say even to a fault. It's very difficult to fail a student when Bindu is sitting in the room. When we discuss to moderate, and there have been many failures which have become passes because she insisted that it should be so, even if the performance academically would indicate otherwise. And she was always right. All of them have gone on to do tremendously well. So she had a deep passion, a deep understanding of the student outside of the class as well. And I know this from conversations I've had with her. She was a great defender of freedom of expression of students, even when she disagreed with their point of view. I was telling Balaji, who I'm very happy is here with us, about an incident before a convocation of ACJ once. We used to, in the old days, produce what's called a convocation issue of a special convocation issue, edited, produced by the students. I won't go into the details. There was a particular article which at that time was very sensitive, and the convocation being a public event, when I looked at it, I saw it at the last minute, honestly. I was worried whether this being distributed could create a problem, because I have to wear the institutional hat sometimes. And Bindu was stoutly defending the reason why it should be distributed, because she argued. So I said, "Do you agree with?" She said, "No, I don't agree with this at all. But that's the point. You have to defend what you don't agree with." And that was the nature of Bindu Bhaskar. And she was not just a tremendous presence. I mean, she made the pedagogy at our college, the processes, the way we wanted to implement the curriculum, the loopholes in it. She had a sense of what was wrong, what needed to be done to correct that, and she did it very unostentatiously, very quietly, but when she believed in it, very, very, very firmly. So we were lucky, in fact, to have someone of the caliber of Bindu to be with us for so long, and in the formative years of ACJ, that she was there with us, made ACJ that much richer. And ACJ, the institution, the spirit of the institution, owes a lot to someone like Bindu Bhaskar. I'm so happy that we are having very illustrious alumna and an alumnus as well to be speaking to us about the subject that we are discussing, women journalists in India today, or journalism by women in India today. And ACJ has always prided itself on the fact that from day one, we've had far more women students than men students. The ratio has never dropped below 60-40, if I'm right. It's normally been 80-20, 70-30, or 60-40 in favor of the women. And we're very proud about that. And I think if there are a lot of women journalists working out there, I think we must have turned out about 3,000 on a conservative estimate, journalists who are there. Most of them are probably still in the media in one form or the other. So the presence of women is so strong here, which may be not quite the situation outside in the real world. We were just told by one of our participants today, Rufa, who was talking about in the first post, she continues probably to be the only woman, plowing a lonely furrow, but doing it with tremendous grace and elegance and success. So that's the nature of the real world, and I'm happy that we continue to go against the grain and yet be successful and set an example. This is also true in terms of the inclusiveness. Students from ACJ, I think, Dalit students from ACJ, are the Dalit presence in the media today. Outside of that, there's literally nothing. So I think we are proud of these factors as much as the huge successes of some of our students, of our alumni, some of whom are here, and they do us proud every day. Every time I see the byline of one of our students, in fact, I don't recognize. Someone tells me that was our student, and then I'm so proud of this. Every time we see someone on screen breaking a story or contributing something, doing something seminal, shall we say, in the media. It's very difficult to do that these days because of the clutter out there, because of the competition, because there's more and more of the same. And yet to be standing above that and to be noticed and to have your distinctive voice is indeed something. And I'm so proud that so many of our students are in that sense unique. They are the driving force. They are determining the course, the nature of the media in the positive sense of the term. And I'm so proud of that. I was, Ranjit, the secretary of the organization, he said that ACJ has played a role in determining, in determining your character. I was reminded of a joke, some of you might have heard this, relates to Mr. Manishankar Iyer, who in the good old days has actually also come to our college and spoken to our students, who is a Stephanian. He was from St. Stephen's College. And, there was Mr. Natwar Singh, who has not come here, who was senior to him, also a Stephanian. Natwar Singh used to be a minister. Some of the younger students will know that. So when the old students like here are invited to St. Stephen's College, and they have to then write in the visitor's book, at the end of they address the students. And when Natwar Singh went to the college, he wrote in the visitor's book, "All that I am is because of my college." And he signed Natwar Singh. And then a week or two later, it was Manishankar Iyer's turn, and he was invited, and he finished, he spoke to the students, and then when he left, he had to write in the visitor's book, and he saw the preceding entry, so he just drew an arrow and said, "Don't blame your college for everything." So I hope that's not the case here, and that I hope the college did play a role in making you what you are, but you do us proud because you keep the flag flying, and the college is, as I said at the outset, what the teachers hear and what you make of it. So more power to your elbow, keep the flag flying. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Now we'll have Mr. Harsha Subramaniam. He's the president of the ACJ Alumni Association. He's going to speak to you a little about uniting the alumni for a shared future and the efforts the committee has been making for that.
Thanks, Mansa. I've come prepared, unlike what I did in college. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. Thank you specifically to the family of Bindu. Wonderful to have you here, sir. I belong to the first batch of the Asian College of Journalism, batch of 2001. It feels like yesterday when I was here, and it's been 2.5 decades already. For me, ACJ was really about a lot of work that we did, a lot of partying that we did. And this college instilled in me a deep passion for journalism and for storytelling. I think that has put me in good stead even today. It was here I made wonderful friends for life. And I think I mentioned this even the last time when we were here. Many of them who got jobs, and I'm still wondering how they are employed by their respective employers, because they did nothing of use here. Many of them didn't turn up today, and this is my take that moment to them when they watch this video. I think the solid foundation that ACJ gave us, many of us grew as journalists, and many of us found job opportunities outside the traditional news realm as well, and that was because of the foundations we had here. Today, the ACJ alumni represent the best of the business in many companies. I think Ranjit alluded to this. There are reporters, editors, producers, presenters, entrepreneurs, corporate communication professionals, public policy wonks, and I met a few last week who work for AI companies. This is the kind of talent that this college has produced. And as Sashi sir mentioned, today's panel of panelists are wonderful examples of the outstanding talent that this college has produced over the past several years. We're talking at a time when journalism is going through an incredible state of flux, and I think we're all aware of the challenges that the profession goes through. Despite the existential challenges that journalism has, I personally remain bullish about journalists and the need and purpose for journalists. At the core of it all, storytelling and the power of building communities cannot be understated. The formats of storytelling may change, the platforms in which these stories are told may evolve, but journalists will need to adapt to the change, and I'm a firm believer that great content will find audience that will make good money, and that's the question of whether a business model is sustainable or not. I'm aware and I admit that there are no clear answers today, but there are interesting new models that both in India and globally that are emerging based on building niche communities that offer quality content that connected by quality content that audiences really care about. You add a layer of technology to it, ability to capture data of your audiences, and you will be able to build a sustainable model. Those are only going to emerge. And therefore, I remain optimistic about the future of journalism. And coming together of journalists to build communities is one such step in that direction. The ACJ Alumni Association is one such step. The ACJ Alumni community is one such step. I'll just take a moment to explain to you what we are up to so that everyone is aware. The Alumni Association was launched in June this year. At the launch, the executive committee consisted of 9 alumni and 2 ACJ professors. we committed to a charter of 12 guiding principles. One of them says, and I quote, to build and foster a strong, vibrant, world-class alumni network of ACJ and to provide a forum for its members. That's exactly what we're trying to do here today. In the past 3 months, the executive committee has met multiple times to define its charter and plan this event. I'm happy to inform you that we have officially registered the association with the Registrar of Societies in Tamil Nadu. We are on the way of starting our own bank account and activating our payment gateway. Our social media handles are up and running. Our web page will soon be ready. We will be putting out our activities with the association through our social handles. So if you're an alumni sitting here or watching this video, please register. We have ambitious plans laid out in our charter. Networking events such as these, scholarships, prizes, workshops, a scholarship or a prize in Bindu's honor is something that we are keen to do, and we would need contribution from everyone in the alumni that really help us do our job. Just one clarification, many people came and asked me, many people have pinged me about how do I become a member. All ACGites are by default members of the association. However, to formalize your membership, you need to register. As I mentioned, links will be prominently displayed on our social media handles for you to go ahead and share your data. What has happened is most of the database that we have is old database. Some of the email, phone numbers don't exist, so whatever we do, it may not reach out to you. The objective of doing an event like this is to ensure that our message goes out and we are able to rope in as many alumni as possible. Currently, we've got about 200 odd alumni registered with us. We have 25 batches, close to 2,700 journalists out there, which means we have a tall ask. We need to convert as many people as possible to join the association. Lastly, and most importantly, I'm delighted that we're here today to honor one of our own, Bindu Bhaskar. We've been planning this event for a month, and I have many people to thank. Thank you, Sashi sir, for your guidance. Kalyan sir, for being so patient with us and acceding to all our requests. Nalini ma'am, thank you. Malini and Lakshmi from ACJ, thank you for your support. But I want to take a moment to really thank the executive committee, Ranjit, who's been the driving force, and so much so my daughter started chiding me, saying that, oh, that Ranjit is calling you once more. So we've been on talking to each other every day. Vrinda and Nitin Narayan, who are not here, but who've done some stellar work on the social media that you've seen. Aditya, Revati, Anirudh, Aminul Islam from Bangladesh, Mansa, deeply appreciate all of you spending time for a cause like this. I hope you enjoy the panel discussion this evening. I also hope that this event does justice to what Bindu stood for. Thank you.
Thank you, Harsha. So we're now going to start our panel discussion, Women Shaping Journalism in India. May I please request all the panelists to kindly come on stage.
I had originally requested Mr. Sashi Kumar to moderate this panel discussion. He also promptly agreed, but he then looked at the list of the panelists, and then I think he reminded himself of how notorious all these were in college, and said, no, it's better maybe you do it. So on that note, look, I'm the oldest of this lot, so I'm allowed to rag. But thank you. This is really an interesting mix of panelists. We have Yogita Limaye, who works with an international broadcaster, Rupa Ramani, who works with a large Indian media network, Danya Rajendran, who's an entrepreneur and a digital publisher. Soumya has been a teacher and is shaping journalists in a different way, and also the only print reporter in this mix. Let me set the ball rolling by perhaps asking, Danya, I'll start with you. As an entrepreneur, I really wanted to start with each of their journeys. The audience predominantly is students of the ACJ, and many of them will find all your stories inspiring to do what they have to do. What prompted you to really take that call of becoming an entrepreneur, starting News Minute? You earned your stripes doing television. What is it that prompted you? And more importantly, in the last many years, News Minute has become the strong, credible voice from South India. Have you sort of accomplished what you set out to achieve?
Thank you. So whenever anyone asks me this question, I wish I had a very fancy answer that I had a whole mission planned out, but actually I didn't. My first job was with the Malayalam channel because Shashi Kumar sir told three of us Malayalis that there was a new channel coming up, the first 24-hour news channel in Kerala, and he told us that you can work there, so we went there. After that, I was with the New Indian Express for 8 or 9 months because TV is in my blood and I had to just get out of print. So I went and joined Times Now. I was there for 8 years. That's all. I mean, you can just understand that I had to somehow get out. I mean,
You don't have to say anymore.
Yeah, it was fun in the beginning. I wouldn't say no, but it started becoming not fun at all. So I had to get out. And then my story is actually very simple. I resigned from my job. I had a baby by then. And in India, you cannot take a sabbatical because then everybody is asking you, what are you going to do? Do you have a job? So I just wanted to breathe for 3 months at least because I was South Bureau Chief of Times Now. It was a really busy job. I wouldn't take leave for maybe 1 or 2 years. It was that bad. Yeah, I mean, you can imagine how things were. And I couldn't take a sabbatical because everybody kept asking me, what are you doing next? What are you doing next? So I did go for 1 or 2 interviews with television channels. And then I was very scared I would be going back to that life. So I was like, 2 options in front of me. One is take up another TV job or start something so people won't ask you, what is your next job? And I really did not know that starting a website requires money. So I thought you can just go register. And then because Dhanya Rajendran is so popular, millions of people will immediately come and click. I'm telling you seriously, these were my thoughts. So I started the website. I did not have any money. My husband thankfully had a better job than me and he had money. So he gave me some money to hire 2 reporters for 1 year. That's all the money that we had. So we had 2 reporters, me and Chitra Subramaniam also for some reason knew me. And she said, I will also be part of the founding team. That's how the news bullet started. But within a year, I realized you need money. Even for www. You actually have to pay server money, which I did not realize. So after borrowing money for a year, then we got someone to actually invest. That's when I think the journey started. I only knew from the beginning that I would focus on South India. And I was really tired of the way news would look at women, or rather not even see them. So those were 2 things I knew for sure. But rest of it just took shape. But at the same time, Scroll and The Wire began. And they really had good business plans. So you can also begin a website with a good business plan. You can otherwise try the route like mine, which is not have a business plan, but somehow things will work out. So yeah, that's my entrepreneurial journey, though I don't call myself that.
Masterclass. Thank you for that, Dhanya. That's a candid observation. Let me also come to Yogita now, and I must commend Yogita because she is perhaps the only Indian journalist working for an international broadcaster today to be deployed in a conflict zone. She's covered Ukraine, she's covered Afghanistan. But it did not start out this way for Yogita. You started as a business news presenter for the BBC.
Well, way before that, I actually started at CNN IBN as what was then called a desk editor, which is kind of a back-end job where you just take in footage and PTCs that come in from correspondents on the ground and put them together. I won't go chronologically because I will bore you all to death. You'll fall asleep. But I'll say the couple of things sort of, in breaking through. I think there are, in all of them, I think shortly before I came to ACJ in 2005, I had a moment of clarity about what I wanted to do with my life. I wanted to be a journalist, I wanted to be a broadcast journalist, and I wanted to be on the field as a story is developing and reporting that. And that was cemented here in ACJ. I think, Nishat sir who would make us go and, be where the story is, go here, go there. And, obviously you don't get your dream job as soon as you join the industry. But I think the thing that has worked for me is, never be afraid of voicing your ambition. I think to just keep saying, this is what I want to do, please let me do it, going to an editor, coming up with a story idea, just putting your hand up when other people are on leave. So a lot of my, early experiences in the BBC came because of that. I mean, I went to Afghanistan the first time because actually the reporter who was meant to go had something, he felt sick, something happened, and I put my hand up and I was there. And then once I was there, I was like, okay, I want to do more. But I think the other thing is that when you get, when I've got that opportunity, I feel like you've got to really seize it. And when I say seize it, it's not about, sometimes you get lucky with the story, sometimes there's a bit of bad luck. But I think if you prepare, if you really, really, really prepare, and if you really work hard, and if you have ambition, I would say 9 out of 10 times you will come out with something that's good. And your credibility as a reporter then grows, and then an editor begins to see you as somebody they can send into any kind of chaos, and you'll come back with a good story. And once you've got that, then you can keep, I think, pushing it. But I also we say this all the time as a phrase that you're only as good as your last story. And I think I absolutely, fully, completely believe that. I think I live that every day, because not with the negative kind of pressure, but with the positive pressure that forget what you've done in the past. It's what you do next. That's what matters.
Thank you, Yogita. Rupa, you've been for the last 2 decades a sports journalist for CSK fans in the house. Rupa has worked with sport broadcasters, but she's also been a digital creator for Chennai Super Kings. What was the tipping point for you in your professional journey?
Tipping point. Okay, I think the basis of my journey is the fact that people say I'm surrounded by women who know exactly what they wanted, but I just knew one thing: I love sports. That's it. I don't think I can't imagine life without it. And even when I meet anyone, I say, even if you don't want to take up sports professionally in any capacity, play sport. Because sport teaches you how to be in life. It teaches you how to win, how to lose nicely, how to lead, how to be a team player. And a lot of that helps you in any profession that you take up, right? But for me, I think right from the time, and we were discussing this just before we came onto the stage, right from the time I was studying, and you have to pick Nishad sir's name for everything. I mean, anything that had to happen, and in some ways it was him, and the way he's so crazy about, even something like camera work. All of those things built into making me get to where I have right here. I mean, CSK happened later on, but like what Yogita said, something works and then something happens. The first ever year, 6 months into a profession, I was not supposed to go anywhere. I was not supposed to travel. My colleague was supposed to. Her visa didn't come through. My editor asks me, do you know how to do camera work? I can always look and say, of course not. I'm a reporter. I'm not going to do camera work. But I looked at him and said, sure I can. Because I learned it in ACJ, I can do it. I'll figure it out, but I know I can do it. And my first gig was as a camera person in UK, and 2 good things came out of that. Of course, India beat England in the first ever series ever, 2-1, memorable, Rahul Dravid captaincy, I'll never forget that. And I met the man I would end up marrying. So amazing stuff happened right there, and tipping point for me, I don't think I've reached there yet. I keep thinking the orbital shift is yet to come, because for women in sport, it's an anomaly. I started taking up sport when athletes were told, that's a boys' playground. You can't wear those clothes. You can't play. It's the physicality, the masculinity that's associated with sport generally keeps women away both on and off the field. And, we were privileged. I think a lot of us were privileged to be in newsrooms which had a lot of women. But when you move to broadcast, it's lonely for women, because the numbers just drastically goes from what Shashita was saying, 80 to 20. It's just the opposite for broadcast. Like, I have been in World Cups where I am one of 120 men, there's just 3 of us. And one of them is Mayanti Langer, who was a presenter. So I think for women, I think generally it will be safe to say the tipping point is yet to come, because the struggle is on. And just to echo what they say, you're as good as your last story, you're as good as your last project, your last week. So it's a constant evolution that I think we need to sort of work towards. And the one thing that I do want to pick in here at this point, Harsha, I know I'm deviating a bit, but I guess the one area where I feel we can sort of make a change is women anywhere, women journalists, women professionals. Maybe don't, I know it's tough because every time we step into a room, we have to be the best man in the room, not just the best person.
Correct.
But I guess the point is to stop looking at each other as competition and start looking at each other as your ally. I think that becomes another reason why your tipping point can come earlier.
Well said. Thank you for that. Soumya, you have had a very interesting career as well. You've reported from China, you've reported from Taiwan, you've now chosen to be an independent journalist and a teacher. Walk us through your journey.
I actually wanted to be an IAS officer, but I felt like I have now fashioned a career around hanging out outside the IAS officer's door, waiting for that one line they would tell me which would make news. But I think, unlike everyone else on this panel, I didn't set out to be a journalist. I didn't have any, I'm going to be a journalist when I grow up. I was told by my family, you're going to do journalism, because they saw an ad in the paper for ACJ, and they said, you know, you're not really doing this IAS thing very well, so you have some kind of random blog that you send out once in a while. You seem to know how to write. So my uncle literally drove me to the college gate and said, go write the exam. So my journey was a little different because I felt like I just learned how to be a journalist after I was here and I got recruited into the Hindu. And I came here knowing I'm too shy to be in front of the camera, so I'm going to do print. So I was very clear that I never want to be seen anywhere close to camera. And I've been a print journalist now for 14 years, so I guess it's worked out. And same as everyone else, I think it was when the opportunity came, I just took it. So I pretty much worked my way up from covering sewage, municipal corporation, things that happen around a city, to being told, hey, you're going to go spend a year in China, to now voluntarily deciding to write my first book, which I think is just stupid, but I'm really enjoying it. So yeah, I've gone from working out 400-word copies to now writing 100,000 words. So it's been quite, no, more than 100,000 words. Anyway, it's been quite a long journey, yeah.
Thank you. I'm not going to shift focus to talking about gender and representation. And Danya, specifically, let me call out 2 points, right? One is the question of gender, how you approach it in your own newsroom, and specifically in the selection of stories. How do you approach it? Do you have a fixed plan in mind? If you could talk through that.
There's a fixed plan in mind, yes. That is, I mean, whenever we go for any events, which is not in a journalism college, but everywhere else, people ask, are you neutral? I hate it when people ask me, are you neutral? Because I don't think that's the job of journalists, to be neutral, right? You have to be objective, you have to be biased towards the truth. But every morning when you wake up, for example, you choose a story that you want to do, and that's where your bias is. So I would say, yes, we are biased towards doing stories about women, about children, about gender rights. So yes, that is there. Also, the thing is, how do you approach a story? That's where, like for example, crime reporting in India. I can take a very small story as an example. There's this one headline which bothered me a few years ago, which said that a woman kills hubby on first night for not being handsome. And the word hubby was used, so it's just stuck in my brain. So it just shows that women are shallow, and this woman in particular is shallow. It may be true, she may have killed him. But the point is, as a crime reporter, you just call the police station and ask, what was her version, right? Her version was that she was not ready for the marriage. The man forced himself on her, and then she murdered him. There is another version to the story, right? So reporting is just also including the other voice, which many times, every day when we read newspapers, I feel like there's not even an effort taken to reach out or understand the other side. Simple things, like, for example, this word called manel, which now you see a lot of movement on social media. Whenever there's a panel with you will not be accused of that. Yeah. So whenever there's a panel with only men, we keep saying, why is there a manel? Why is there a manel? But that vocabulary itself has come only very recently, right? So that also is to be told to the newsroom. If you are doing a story, recently I had a reporter who had gone to do a story from Kerala about a bridge which is being constructed in Malappuram, and how the metro man is actually saying no to the bridge, because apparently the bridge is between some Vishnu temple, Rama temple, and some other temple. So it will destroy the divine triangle. So she came back, she filed a story, and there are a lot of male voices. And I asked her, aren't there any women staying there? Because you have to continuously tell your reporters that whether it's politics, whether it's economics, there are women, there are gender minorities. So I think that's a constant process in a newsroom. It cannot be like when somebody comes in, you tell them and then you forget about it. That's a daily thing you have to do. Otherwise the way the newsroom operates will never change.
Yogita, picking up the same point that Danya is making, I have seen your stories from Afghanistan where you've, extremely powerful stories of pregnant women, young children. How has that influenced your storytelling? Is that something that you go with, again, with a fixed plan, or is it a...
So I think, one is, and I agree with Dhanya, I think there is, there's an unconscious bias almost. As a woman, you feel perhaps more strongly for those stories. And there's also the story of, women being banned from almost everything in Afghanistan. So I think, we always go with the intent of doing that. I think, the one thing in Afghanistan is, as a woman, there's a pro and con situation to this. So when you're on the field, you have better access to women in some ways because women will actually talk to you in a way that they probably won't talk to men. So you can actually go in and get that story. The reverse is also true in Afghanistan, that women will have lesser access to the, to the de facto government at the moment, which is the Taliban government. And, you have to go through a fair bit of indignity. For example, I'll give you an example of an interview that I did with the Taliban deputy spokesman. It was just in August this year. He refused to sit opposite me. He said we can't be seen in the same frame. So the picture can't have him and me together. So I actually did the interview where he was sitting there, the translator was sitting here. I was sitting here basically looking at a wooden pillar. We said that because I thought it was important to be honest with our audiences about how that interview was conducted. But I thought, we have the opportunity to ask the questions that need to be asked, so we need to do it. So, for me, it crossed the bar of, should we say no, we're not going to do the interview like this, or go ahead and do it. So I think there's that, but the one thing I will also agree, I think that's what you are saying, isn't it? That it is, getting a woman's perspective on it and getting more women in it, that sometimes is an unconscious bias, but I do think it will not happen only organically. You have to, I think you have to focus on getting that. You have to think of every story, like every story that I do, there is no, there will always be a woman's voice in that story. I've just, I just wouldn't do it without a woman's voice in the story. Whatever it is, whether it's in Afghanistan, whether it's in Ukraine, wherever it is. And this is, so a few years ago, I'll just give this one example because I want to give it as an example of how it actually worked. The BBC Summit, a colleague came up with this project called the 50-50 project, where actually every on-air bit, so whether it was a program or whether it was a report you were doing, you had to have gender balance. The ratio should be balanced in that. And what that did, and I remember at that time I was a business correspondent with the BBC, and we used to have this set of, out of 10 economists that you would go to for a soundbite on television, 9 were men, only 1 was a woman. And when you were forced in the direction of looking that you had to actually get a woman on that, suddenly we discovered, just out of sheer laziness or, calling the same people over and over again, we didn't know actually these women, who gave perfectly good sound bites were, really, really good in what they were saying. And we discovered that. But, you have to be pushed. We had to be pushed in that direction. So I would say it's not only organic. You have to make a conscious effort.
I just want to add a point here. For example, when you look at, I don't know what the ratings are anymore, TAM or BARC, I think nothing is there anymore, right?
Not relevant.
Not, yeah. But still the ratings looked at male, 25 plus, which is an average man in India who makes money. So for most newspapers, that would be the audience that they're catering to. I remember a Times of India editor, I don't know what he's doing anymore, but he used to say that the man playing golf in Bengaluru is your audience. So, quote, another 3 men playing golf, right?
Soumya, there's another angle to this, right? If, I want you to talk about your experience as a reporter in China, where being a woman and seeing that, that society as a woman journalist was very different.
I went to China for a year in 2019, and all the other Indian journalists there were all men. And I actually didn't even get invited to lunches they all would go to together because they just thought I was there on a fellowship and I wasn't a serious journalist. So I would see these Twitter posts that they would all hang out, but I wouldn't be invited. And the one time I got invited to their home, one of their, a private sort of lunch, it was all the men were hanging out together, drinking whiskey, all the wives were hanging out, having juice, and they asked me what I want, and I was like, can I have a beer? I'd like to sit right in the middle, not knowing which way, because professionally, I belong to this group that was hanging out, but gender-wise, I'm supposed to be hanging out with all the wives. But I was noticing that all the stories they were doing from China were fairly aggressive. They were about border tensions, which is all important stories. It is important to map how India and China relate to each other in the border region. All of that is important. But being our biggest neighbor, it was appalling to me that we didn't know anything beyond that. And language was not an excuse. You can find people to talk to, and I found them in all the women whose stories I tried to look for. And I remember doing a story about a woman who ran this website called Yummy, and it was an LGBTQ community. She was a lesbian who purposely decided to put out this anonymous website where women could come and ask any question about sexuality. And I had written to her saying, can I write about you? And she said, well, the New York Times just covered me, and it became a big deal, and I got censored, so can you give me 2 months, let me wait it out. And for her, the risk was zero to speak to an Indian journalist because it didn't matter, because nobody cared about these stories, right? But I was the only one who wrote that story in all the years of all the men who covered China. And I just found it really difficult to process how can you look at journalism in a foreign setup without looking at most of the population, or without looking at society or culture, or any of those stories that is not a bunch of men wearing uniforms are aggressively yelling things at each other at the border, right? So I think the gap I was trying to fill in that context was, let me explain people, because actually they're a lot like us. They are Asian, we are Asian, they have similar family values. So those things were really interesting to me. And that's something that, because you were talking about how do you look at stories here, I think that's something I tell my class now, that it's not only the responsibility of women to do women's stories. And I think the young men in my class, I'm constantly open your eyes to this, don't just think of it as only women are responsible. So I think the Me Too series of stories is a great example. When I was working at the Indian Express, we were covering that in Delhi, and it was always a woman who was assigned to that story, and it really bothered me. And I remember having these fights with my editor saying, why are you only assigning the women? Why can't men go and write these stories, right? So I think that's one, and currently the book I'm working on is extremely political, and I don't have any women in my book, and it's appalling to me that I don't, because I'm constantly where are the women? Why are men the gatekeepers of history and archaeology and narratives and politics? And when I go up to them, they're very aggressive about the questions I ask, because they're like, oh, but you're from here or you're from there and you shouldn't be asking all this. And I actually felt like I'm writing an apology at the introduction saying, I'm sorry that this book is lacking women's voices. But it's a big hole. Unless you're going looking for it, it's very difficult to find women in these stories.
Rupa, you alluded to the lack of women in sport as sports journalists. I think this was the case even when I graduated from here, that very few women even were doing sports electives. I couldn't even think of many sports journalists who are women, other than Sharda, of course. But why is that the case? And are things changing? Is that systemic? Is that...
So that it's a couple of things. I think one, let's attribute the culture itself. I think India as a sporting culture is not a culture that sort of says, hey, it has a great sporting culture, so everyone plays sports, so sports becomes like a way of life, so then that becomes an option for career path as well. Like anything else, right? If you look at any profession, you have everyone being interested or at least pushing them towards that. But sport is so niche, it becomes something that a section then gravitates towards. I think that's one. Second, the environment itself, and I'm vehemently nodding when Soumya was talking about that whole situation where men not doing women's stories and women doing stories. I mean, there's a problem there. And that becomes a lot of, it sort of blows out of proportion when you're looking at sports, because, for example, every time I entered a room in IPL in CSK, and look, I learned so much from there. The kind of person I am today, the kind of professional I am today is a lot because of those years that I spent there, because you learn a lot. You enter a room and you find yourself being the only woman in a room full of men. It's daunting. It's empowering, but it's daunting because your perspective is so unique. It takes a while to win over a majority which goes in one direction, right? It's a lot of that and that resistance is very tough to get over. I mean, I'm saying right now that it's so easy, to be where I am and get where I am, it's for all of us, I don't think it's easy. I think we need to own up to the fact that it's difficult to get here and acknowledge that it takes a lot. As women, we always say, and this I heard from a lot of my seniors as well, and one particular senior who says, women are used to saying sorry, like how Samay said, sorry. We should stop saying that. Start acknowledging certain things out there. Start accepting that, this is difficult or this is not how things are supposed to be. I can even, again, I want to make this anecdotal. The first ever time I produced a live World Cup match 10 years ago, Australia, it was one of the best moments for me. Again, the only woman there in the entire crew. One of the best hosts of cricket and someone I know everyone would look up and live up to. I won't take names, of course, but I was producing a game and I said, okay, I want to start. There was something very controversial that happened. It was Australia versus Pakistan. And the Pakistan batter was on the verge of winning, but he kept giving the strike to the other batter so that he could score 100. So it was very controversial. I wanted to start the show with that. So I go to this host and say, this is what my idea is. I want to start this way. And he says, Rupa, we don't do it this way. I've done broadcasts for way more years than you have. I'm not going to do the show this way. So I am shivering in my boots because this is someone I've sort of looked up to and I've watched all these years. And I go back to the piece and I said, okay, I'm going to change. And my director, who's respected, he's been there for many, many years, and he's suddenly saying, Rupa, who's the producer? I said, me. Who's made this run order? I said, me. So it's yours. Tell him you're supposed to do it this way. I said, okay. So I said, hey, Mr. XYZ, I'm sorry, I respect where you come from. I know you know what you're doing, but we're doing it this way. And it goes live. We get a lot of responses. People are coming in saying, we wanted to speak about, we wanted the experts to talk about exactly this. You have Wasim Akram coming in, Damon Fleming, all of them speaking about it because they're obviously very passionate about that moment. And then kudos to that host. He walks into the PCR after the show, comes in, shakes my hand saying, I'm sorry for suspecting. I'm sorry for doubting you. That was a good show. Great on him to do that, but it takes a lot for a woman to get to that position where everyone else says, oh, she knows what she's doing. Because especially in sports, where it's all about technicality, it's all about knowing, you need to, for them to earn your respect, it just takes that much more time. And, yeah.
Well said. I have actually a data point that I'm going to throw to this panel, and if any of you want to respond to this. This is I don't know if you've seen this latest Reuters report. Reuters Institute has analyzed 240 major news outlets in 12 countries. Women make up for nearly 40% of the total number of employees, but only 24% of them are top editors. Leadership position in newsrooms is still a male preserve. There are obviously smaller organizations which are slightly different. This does not include India, though. And there was another study that also talked about unequal pay. For every, on an average, 83 cents for every dollar earned by men. Women earn only 83 cents. This is, again, focused on the United States. The larger point I'm trying to make is leadership, pay, these are all problems that women face across the board, and newsrooms are no less or no different. Any responses to any of these?
It's unsurprising, I think, and it's very true. And I think it's an issue internationally, but is also, I think, an issue domestically. I don't know what the statistics are. And I think some of the reasons, I think, for women to drop out from, sort of the mid-senior levels are similar to what happens in other professions. I think it's, if you have a child and you want to be away for 1 year, and then when you come back, how do you get back into that? And I think in journalism, again, because I keep, you are only as good as the last thing that you did, and people forget very quickly what you've done. And so then if you've been out for a year or something like that, and then you come back in after that, it becomes harder. And so I do think that is one sort of big factor in why you have the statistics that you have. So, sorry, can I just, on the pay front, it's funny, somebody once told me this, and since then I was like, okay, I'm not going to be this person. that actually that women don't come and ask for pay raises as often as men do. Apparently men walk into rooms and can just be like, I'm worth this much, pay me this. And I don't know what it is and why it doesn't happen. I've asked myself that question. Maybe it's social conditioning.
It is social conditioning. And I also think women are very embarrassed about this, saying that, oh, I don't deserve this. When men walk in and say, I obviously am worth more than this.
So there is a survey which is done, I think, almost every year by Oxfam and News Laundry in India. They have been looking at how many newspapers, television channels, and websites in India have women editors, or women in the top positions, right? So newspapers, I think, is around 18% of, it just keeps fluctuating, always below 20. Television, I think, is a bit better. Digital does very well. Why? Because people like me started our own sites. If it was somebody else's site, they would not have made me the editor. Therefore, digital does well because a lot of women started websites, like Shaili Chopra, who was supposed to be here, and so many women entrepreneurs, right? Journalists. So that's the only reason why digital does well. I think it's way worse in vernacular, in like you take languages, regional languages, Tamil, Kannada, Hindi, whatever it is. So even when one editor comes, recently we had done an interview, my colleague Shabir had interviewed the editor, the first woman editor in a Tamil channel. She's the first woman editor-in-chief. Can you imagine, after so many years? Sugita. So it's a Tamil interview. I think Veena George in Kerala was the first editor-in-chief of Malayalam channel. Then we have Sindhu Suryakumar in Asianet. Even in Kerala, which is supposed to be, the place from where a lot of journalists come, right? There are only very few states which are still interested in journalism. Even there, we don't have women editors in print, in television, it's very less. And it does. I'm not saying that having a woman editor solves all the problems in the newsroom, but it does make a difference when you have at least a few people in the top ranks. Like at the News Minute, when I started out, gender was my focus. I thought I should have more women in the newsroom. But after 4 or 5 years, I understood that it can't just be a binary of women versus men. I have to also look at people who come from different communities, gender minorities. So we have made sure that the top 5-6 people are all people from different walks of life and from different communities. I think newsrooms have to be very, very cognizant of this, or it's not going to change.
Fair point. I want to shift focus of this conversation to the operating environment for journalists today. I personally, as someone who's not in the newsroom for the last 5 years, look at this environment and say, people in positions of power, whatever it is, if it's a politician, a bureaucrat, a corporate organization, they've all become supremely thin-skinned. Everyone are using whatever powers they have in their hands, intimidation tactics, harassment, defamation. How do you operate in an environment like this? Maybe you can start, Danya. You're well versed in this topic.
Yeah. So if you could see the screen of my phone around 7 in the evening, my lawyers we don't have too many cases compared to a Deccan Herald, which will have some 500 injunctions. But for a small newsroom, we have a lot of cases. So around 7 to 9 is when my lawyers will come back from the courts and they will send these updates. So 7 to 9, my phone will just have these updates from all the lawyers saying this case came up, or this judge didn't turn up, or next one. So I'm thinking, okay, fine. So almost every day is like that. I don't know. See, initially, like 10 years ago, the problem was online harassment. I feel like I'm a veteran as far as online harassment goes, so I don't pay much attention to it anymore. But there are times that I feel really horrible. I lose my sleep for 2 or 3 days. Last year, I switched off my phone for 2 days because it was really getting to me. But I think for the young people who join my newsroom, it is a big deal. They are where I was 10 years ago. And it can really get to you now because these are very organized things. They are no longer sporadic, spurts of anger against you on the internet. This is extremely organized. They will call your employer. Like, for example, if you're working for a bigger organization, they will call your employer. They will harass you. So I think one young journalist have to understand that there is a use for social media, but beyond that, that cannot rule our life. That cannot rule the stories we do, that cannot make us the person that we are. And then the second layer of harassment comes from defamation cases. And it's not just defamation, right? We are dealing with journalists who are booked under UAPA, who are booked under sedition. But I don't think we should worry the classroom that way. Maybe in like 5, 6 years, you'll all be there. But as long as your newsroom supports you, it's something we can fight. And the editor of Telegraph, Rajagopal, says, and I really agree with him, that you cannot be a journalist fearing that you will go to jail or there will be a case against you. You should be a journalist thinking, yay, this case is coming against me, or that maybe they will actually send me to jail for this. So, in the sense that the fear cannot be ruling you, right? The challenge should. So, I think to young journalists, we should say that all these challenges, they are tough, but it's not something which you cannot cross, which is not something that you cannot deal with.
Yogita, you've also reported from conflict zones where there's risk of physical assault, silencing, shaming. It's not easy to report in areas like this, where you could probably, your visa could be revoked, you could be jailed. How does one deal with it? And more importantly, how do organizations deal with it?
So I think, well, organizations, I can only speak for mine, is that you actually do a fair bit of risk mitigation. If there is a specific risk because you are of a particular gender, of a, your name sounds like you belong to a particular religion, you're of a particular ethnicity or nationality, you sort of you can never get rid of risk fully, but you actually do a proper risk mitigation and you do a risk assessment. And there are places like in Afghanistan, I would say we regularly, we look at gender as a, mitigating that, having teams that are kind of mixed. So yeah, I would say that it's basically, we do risk assessment and risk mitigation. And, when you come back now, what we've started to do because of the backlash that you often get. Funny thing, we never used to do it earlier. We actually have a risk assessment that you do for after broadcast as well. So, like what kind of backlash could you get? What can you possibly prepare for? And that's actually happened because of, online trolling. And as you said, the abuse, I think is particularly, yes, it is more for women than it is for men. And it is far more vile for women than it is for men.
So just quick point, I mean, nobody is going to Ukraine or Afghanistan like Yogita is, but even in India, which is not even a conflict zone, so many things have to be thought about now while assigning reporters. Simple, Shabarimala, the temple in Kerala, where at one point women were allowed to go, I think just 1 year. It was 2 months of chaos where women would go and they'll be stopped. So women reporters were attacked mercilessly in Shabarimala. They were not even trying to go to the temple. They were just standing in a village which is further down. I had a colleague, Sarita. She was so badly beaten up. She was hospitalized for a month. And then I had a bureau with only women. And I didn't know what to do because women were not able to go report there. It was not just my reporter. A lot of women reporters got attacked. I think the News 18 reporter, Republic reporter got attacked. Then I had another reporter. His name is Cora Abraham. How to send him? Because he's an Abraham. So I couldn't send the guy. Then the only other male reporter who understood Malayalam, he's Mithun Musa. He's a Muslim, but his first name is Mithun. So we told him, don't say Musa, just say Mithun if anybody asks you. So there are so many things that you have to think about, despite not being in a conflict zone. So I definitely don't envy Yogita's position.
Soumya, Rupa, you want to come in on the online trolling bit? And women are particularly vulnerable of the violent viciousness that one sees.
I think my relationship with the internet has just changed a lot. I don't seem to care about it anymore as much as I did at one point. So years ago when I was, doing a great story for the Indian Express, you would feel really pleasurable about sharing that on Twitter, and it would go viral for all the right reasons. And then it's sort of maybe a moron bot X, so things really changed on X too. But a couple of years ago, I did a story for which I got trolled horribly. It was a story on archaeology in Tamil Nadu, and nobody read the story. It was just going crazy at me based on the headline. And I remember an editor who I was working for at the time said, well, if you're going to work for digital, you need to grow a thick skin. And then I remember calling my mother, who is in the audience today, crying, saying, I'm getting abused online. And she said, switch off your phone, which is exactly what I did. I decided not to engage with it. And then, and I'm sure, Danya, I don't know how you deal with this on a daily basis, but I really re-looked at how I look at this whole thing. And I was like, these are fools coming at me. Just don't get so affected. So I think now I am very chill about hate. And it's not a good thing. I mean, obviously, I'm the one who's adapting to the situation. It's not that they have become better. But I think you have to make the distinction between doing good work and sending it out for whoever is going to read it, rather than getting affected by the backlash from idiots who are never going to read anything you say. So I think that is
But the unfortunate outcome of this is their ability to silence you, right? That's a...
I think unfortunate outcome is self-censoring.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah,
correct.
for sure. And I felt like I was doing that at many times, saying I don't want to, yeah. Which really affects you. You do think before putting anything out now, even a political opinion, right? Which I very freely did at one point. Now I'm like, it's okay. I'll just text a few of my friends. They should know what I feel, and that's enough for me.
But it doesn't, but I'm telling you, it doesn't matter what you're talking about. If you're a woman and if you're in front of the camera, you will be trolled. I mean, that's something that comes with the territory. I don't know how many times, and you'd think that, oh, why sports seems like chill and you will not, you're gonna get, I've gotten horrible comments, horrible abuses when I did so many of those videos for CSK. I mean, it was great that it went so well and it did so well, but every time an interview went out, I would dread what comments I would get. And it was kudos to the team also to say, hey, no, you're going to continue. I said, should I stop? No, you shouldn't stop. And they will comment on your DMs, they will message you, they will say things. And even when you put up stories or even if you do something, it doesn't stop. And like Yogita said, women will always be attacked more. It's a fact. And it has nothing to do with what you're saying or even half of what your professional piece is. It's half of how you look, what you're wearing, what you're saying. And it's a lot of that which is far more disturbing than what actually you're working towards or doing.
No, and it's gotten pretty bad. For example, there are a lot of these right-wing sites. They're the ones who do it the most, but not like the others don't do. Everybody does it, left, right, center, everybody does it. Film actor, film actress. They pick up pictures of yours, which can be, no, not even morphed. Like, I mean, I obviously don't want to say it in a large crowd like this, but they will take specific pictures of yours and they will use that. So it's gotten to many different levels now, but I feel like we have to be cognizant of this problem. We can't just wish it away saying, like, for example, I am used to it, but I can't expect someone who's junior in my newsroom or even a senior person to get used to it. So what I tell people is that, see, you are getting harassed now. I mean, I don't even use the word troll. I use the word harassed. You are getting harassed now. You have to switch off for 2 days. I will take care of the rest. I've had a reporter who once in a Twitter exchange, he said that, but the army also does a lot of things in Kashmir. He was saying this in a conversation. The screenshot was doing rounds and I was under a lot of pressure to sack him. And then there were, of course, 2 sedition cases filed against him. I told him, just switch off and go. And I will deal with the rest. But I think we have to continuously also keep watch as to who in our organization is under attack, because it's not a very simple thing. We cannot wish it away.
And that's, this is the thing, because we're speaking to a lot of people who you will experience it, whatever gender you belong to. If you pick issues that are sensitive, you will experience, even if sometimes they're issues which are not very sensitive, you will experience it. And I just want to say it's okay to feel, it's a bit like grief, like it is okay to feel bad, it's okay to cry, it's okay to feel like what's happening, it's okay to feel rage, it's okay to feel angry. But I would say lean on, and having an editor like that, I mean, amazing for your, the people who work with you and work on your team, because that's what you need. You need the support of people, and it's like a tunnel. You will get through it, and the other side there will be light. But now I guess we've all grown a thick skin that you laugh a little bit and be like, okay, how are these people actually going to affect my life? But equally, I just, I don't want it to feel like, oh yeah, it's like water off your back. It's not. It is difficult, and it's okay to feel like that.
I will open this out to the audience, but before that, one last round of questioning I want to ask. And gently, I mean, given all that we've spoken about today, I want to know each one of you and how you feel about the outlook for journalism, for news, in an environment where there are business challenges, there are intimidation and intimidating environment, disruptive technologies. Given all this, how do you individually feel about the profession per se, and what each one of you are doing? Soma, you want to start?
Sure. I'm going to be really positive about this because I now take classes here and I want all my students to do really well. I see that it could turn around. I know we are going through a bit of a crisis, and I think we'll be able to adapt to, like, I think when we spoke for a bit yesterday, we were talking about new ways of storytelling. And I think even for old school print journalists like me, It's just about learning how to tell those stories in, say, a multimedia format, right? But I think we'll do a good job of adapting and being able to tell if there is good material and good content. So if we do a job of training our young journalists well and teaching them all of the good ethics of journalism, I feel very positive about this. And not only because I work here, but I genuinely feel that way.
Danya?
I don't teach at ACJ, but I generally feel very positive about journalism. There is really no other job that I would do in this world. My brother, hopefully this is not on YouTube and he'll be watching it, but he's an IT engineer, and I keep asking, what do you do? Like, what do you do? You have meetings through the night, and it's the same thing, right? It's coding or whatever. It's so boring. I mean, maybe he's changing the world, but I am not aware of it. So I keep asking, what do you do? So I meet different people every day. I have different experiences every day. And I think a lot of people, like my younger colleagues, find it, I was telling Harsha that they find it difficult because journalism perhaps does not pay as much as other industries. It is a very difficult job. Plus, for love, passion, and you know, for patriotism, you can work for 3 or 4 years. But after that, if you're constantly getting abused or harassed online and you are not getting well paid, you would want to leave the job. I understand all those pressures. But this, I think, is the right time to be a journalist in this country. There cannot be a more challenging time. We are at the juncture where we have to fight for what our country stands for, what our democracy stands for. And there is no better job than to be a journalist. And also, you know, when you go out there every day, you know that you have the power and the responsibility to tell someone else's story the right way. So there definitely is not another job that I would do.
Well said.
I mean, I started this discussion talking about how much I'm passionate about what I do, and that doesn't change. I think, you know, like Dhanya says, I can't imagine doing anything else. I love this job a lot. I love what this job gives me. I remember when we started out, I didn't even think of what money I was going to make. I know at these times you can't say that. Money is important. I completely get it. But you've got to ask yourself, are you waking up thinking, I love doing this, I love telling the story, I love saying this, and thinking different ways of, you know, presenting something? And I know that at this point, there isn't any other platform that does sports show talking about not just India-centric, but international-centric shows. What sports is happening around the world, how is it impacting? Recently, I did a story of, you know, the AFC sort of being harsh to an Indian club which refused to travel to Iran right when the Hezbollah really died and when, you know, they bombed Israel. So a lot of these things impact every way of life. I cannot ever think of doing anything else. You know, what I've learned, the kind of person I've become, the friendships I've had, the relationships I've developed, and what this has given me, I don't think anything else would have given me. Yes, it's an ongoing process of change, and I think last 1 year I've become a lot more vocal about, you know, gender politics and how we view all these things, and I keep being a sort of a voice of that, so much so that, you know, a lot of my friends keep echoing what I want to say, but I think it's important for the men to step up too and voice what women voice, because then it becomes our thing and not just a female thing. So, and that applies everywhere, and more so for journalism because it is about expressing stories and storytelling, and nothing else comes more than that, I guess. But yeah.
I think we're in an age where the truth is under attack more than it has ever been before, and that's why I think it's so, like, I don't think, yeah, that's why I think this profession is so crucial at this point. It's difficult, but also I think it is one of the few professions in the world where you actually have the power to impact change. You really, really do. And I'll give you 2 examples just because I don't want to talk in the air. You know, there's a colleague of mine who did a story about the boss of Abercrombie and, you know, the sexual assault allegations against him. He was arrested recently. That's the direct impact of that journalism. We've been covering sort of the situation in Afghanistan for, you know, in the past 3 years, the deteriorating situation with malnutrition. We did a story in August. In September, I had an email from an NGO that operates in Afghanistan saying that we saw your report and we're scaling up our work on malnutrition, and that's affecting change. I will not lie, that happens about 1 out of every 20 stories that you do, so it doesn't happen 19 times, but when it happens, man, I can't describe how that feels. And, you know, even if it's just for that, it's completely worth it.
I'm going to open this out to the audience. If anyone has a question, please
Sorry,
raise.
Harsha, can I just
Yeah,
add
yes.
one thing? An anecdote I wanted to share as a reporter in Delhi soon after the 2012 gang rape that happened. I remember there was a home ministry circular where newsrooms had to provide a vehicle for women reporters to be dropped home at the end of their workday, which means you will be in a car with a driver you didn't know and an armed man who also you didn't know, who will be dropping you to your doorstep so that they can, you know, safely drop you off to your father or brother or husband. That was the unwritten sort of thing. And I used to fight saying, no, I'm happy to take the metro. And I was told, no, you can't take the metro. I said, okay, I want to go out drinking, so can you drop me at that Khan market? No, you can't be dropped anywhere else. You will be taken from the office to your home. And one, the state was coming down by regulating where we went, and the newsroom was under some kind of obligation, I mean, well, not some kind of obligation, very much obligated to do this, with no consultation with the women, saying, what do you want to do? So this is something that I think went on for 6 months, and a lot of us protested, and finally they said, okay, this is not viable because it's costing the office to hire the cab. So on those grounds, we will discontinue this policy. So I think these are the ways in which when you are reporting, you're also dealing with this sort of, you know, bias against you for also choosing to go to a story. You're not allowed to go on a crime story because you're a woman. So these things come up all the time when you're reporting as well.
Thanks for that.
Thank you so much for the enlightening session. I'm Priyanka, a student of ACJ Bloomberg. So my question was the balance about this story. When we say ki we don't approach, we lack the effort of approaching women in the story. So there is somewhere lack of a women version in the story. Because whenever we even want to approach women, they are not encouraged to speak as much. Or even they say, ki, oh, talk to my father or my husband. Whatever male members. So how do we bring balance or the women version in the story so that they can speak? Thank you so much.
I've encountered this a lot in Afghanistan, and I don't have, it's a case-to-case answer, but I would say you've got to just keep pushing. You've just got to say, oh, please, you know, like, you know, whatever, you can cover your face if you want, but we really need to hear from you directly. So I would just keep pushing to hear, you know, the woman speak. And I don't think it's only in Afghanistan. It's happened many times in India as well. There isn't kind of, you know, or you try to, sometimes I've had to get permission from the, from the husband or the, I have actually done this very recently in a hospital in Afghanistan. We were actually calling the husband of the person who was there with a child who was sick to say, can your wife give us an interview? But we waited for that hour till he permitted her to do it, and then we had her voice in the story.
Yeah, and just to quickly add, I agree with Yogita, you have to keep trying. There's no other option. Sometimes you may not get. There are some stories where I know that a lot of women don't want to speak. If you ask them about politics, they don't want to give an opinion. Economics, they don't want to give an opinion. So then you're forced to publish it. But from my learning, we shouldn't restrict to just men and women. We have to think about intersectionality.
So I have 2 questions. I'll quickly ask them and then you can probably answer in short. So the first one is related to the topic today. I've observed that when there is a story about vulnerability or probably deprivation or some sort of disaster, there's always a voice of a woman or reporters go looking for a woman who can give you a couple of quotes. How do you see this? Is this a problem, and what would your thoughts be? And my next question would be to Dhanya Rajendran ma'am. During the Lok Sabha elections, News Minute did a unsponsored, no ad content, and at that time I was interning with a different organization, so I could see how much money was actually coming into the organization, and people there were not happy about doing sponsored content, but they were like, it's the editor's call, so we can't do anything about it. So from that point of view, to look at News Minute doing such a ad-free content was quite inspiring, and I just wanted to ask you about how did you take that step ahead? Were there any probable complications from external sources?
You want to take that? You want to take that answer that question first?
The first question, it's again that inherent bias, right? And also women do suffer more when there is a calamity or when there is a natural disaster. So it is also natural that we go and ask them. But I feel we don't ask the opinion of women or others in less obvious stuff. Like, for example, when it comes to, I remember the story that India Spend had done a few years ago about how when there is poverty, it's the woman who eats the least in the house, right? And how the woman in the house has the most malnutrition compared to everybody else. These are things which sort of escape our minds, right? I think we don't look at them in the obvious stories, but I think it's only obvious that we ask them when there is a disaster, because they are definitely the most impacted. About ad-free, I think most of the English websites, I mean, I can't speak for everyone, but most of the English websites have seen to it that they do not take political money. We used to have like small ads from state governments, which are random articles, but more than that, we have never taken money for events or anything like that. And it was a deliberate call to stop all ads. It started with the election, which is in May 2023, and we are continuing that even now. We do not have any ads. It's a deliberate call to also build communities of people who watch, engage with news, and they feel responsible to pay for news, because then you allow that journalist freedom, right? So for example, yesterday we were running a series on how the Congress government in Karnataka has gone back on its word to repeal the anti-conversion bill. That was one of their manifesto promises, and people are still getting harassed under that anti-conversion law. So we can easily ask the question to the Congress and run a series against them, because we are not paid by them. So that's the whole point, to deliberately stay away from any kind of funding. But I can also say in all honesty that is only possible because we are a small organization. Running an organization of 40, 50 people, it is possible to do that. But when it's a large organization, they have to take money from corporates, from political parties. Unfortunately, that's how the models work. So I can say all sorts of things, that every news organization should not take money, but then they can't pay salaries, or they can't grow beyond a point. So yes, there are limitations in how our revenue models work, but I wish newsrooms thought more about how to change.
Thank you so much for taking your time and giving us this talk. I wanted to ask about how you all mentioned that it was about grabbing the right opportunity. So, but how often do these opportunities come to women in the newsroom, irrespective of like caste, class, and religious or sexuality backgrounds? And considering how severe the harassment is going and how it is being targeted against marginalized communities, how can newsrooms cope with that better? Another question I had was, considering that all of you mentioned about the gender pay gap in journalism, don't you think that women, and particularly people from marginalized communities, are not able to sustain in this profession because of the pay as well?
The first one you mean is career growth, is it? Is that what you're alluding to?
I'm talking about assignments and other reports in general.
Okay, deployment, okay.
I'm not sure I have a good answer for that, if I'm honest. And I am, especially, okay, so I'm going to slightly deviate, and I'm going to say that because a lot of my experience over the last few years has been covering sort of conflict, has been being on the front line of war. And I have to say that that doesn't always, you don't always think of a woman first when, you have those kind of opportunities. So you really do have to wave your hand in front of the face of the person who's making that deployment. And I think that would be true of any story that you really wanted to cover. If there's a particular story or there's a particular beat that you wanted to start covering. I think this used to be very true of like crime reporting. I used to be a city reporter in Mumbai for the first, for a few years before I joined the BBC. And I remember that it was a very male-dominated beat, and you really, really had to kind of, like, if you wanted to be sent out. So I mean, the answer to everything is really, and it's a stupid answer, sorry, I don't have a good answer for you, but it's really about just voicing that what you want to do, and do it, like, I would say do it gently. You don't need to be aggressive in how you ask. You can ask politely, but you can ask again, and ask again, and ask again, until finally they're like, oh, okay, fine, this opportunity's come up, fine, just go and do it.
I want to add on to that. It is difficult, especially in a newsroom, to get chances, especially like you said, and as women, we do tend to be hesitant about voicing about what we want, how ambitious we are, that we want to go out and do it. It's naturally, yes, for a lot of us, or maybe I'm generalizing, I'm not sure, but the tendency, at least for me initially, was, how can I go ahead and ask? Yes, I understand it, but I think another way of probably getting up front and getting people to notice is to have a voice and develop that voice, right? I think we are who, I keep telling people even now, it's great to be associated with an organization, but every time you introduce yourself, you have to introduce yourself as who you are. I think freelance taught me that for 5 years. I had to go and introduce myself as, I'm Rupa. I'm not from an organization, it's me. And your identity is what you need to grow. So dissociate yourself with your organization first. I know it's difficult, but the fact is you need to keep evolving yourself as an identity and a brand. Your voice, your opinion. The more you put out your thoughts there, even if it's out in the open and no one is watching it, you feel about some story, you want to express that, talk about it. Make a space for yourself and make that space your own. And once you start growing there, opportunities will come. It seems very idealistic, but it will happen, and I truly believe it. Your voice is how you strengthen that, is how stronger you will be professionally as well.
So I started this session by saying that I didn't have a business plan, right? But I did have a plan, if though it was not a business plan, and I don't think we should be ashamed of planning our life ahead. I'll tell you a horrible thing that I did, so that you understand how planning is important. When I was in Times Now as a junior reporter in Chennai, there was a senior reporter, a man. So he used to wake up late. So the thing is, I would not wake him up when a big story happens. There was a, I'm not kidding you, so there was a stampede once and some 30 people died. I wouldn't wake him up. I would tell a camera person, come, we'll go. So I would cover the story in the morning. By the time he's awake, Danya's on the field, done the story, finished. And then sometimes I would just go like in front of Dayanidhi Maran's house. I would have actually set up the interview, gone there, Maran, because I did this, I went and took his interview and my boss asked, why? Why didn't you tell me? I said, no, he was just standing there, so I asked him 2 questions. So sometimes you had a plan, and then I finally sat down my boss one day and said, we have both worked here for 2 years. I want to become Chief of Bureau of Tamil Nadu, and I cannot become that because you are here. And you are really talented, you shouldn't be here, you should go to Bombay. He actually agreed. He was a nice person. He said, yes, that's true. I am also restricting myself because he's been damn South Bureau Chief for like 20, 30 years. So he went off to Bombay. He was your husband's boss after that. Yeah. And I became the Tamil Nadu Bureau Chief. Then next step, we will talk in the next session. Yeah, but you have to also plan. There's no other way. You also asked about marginalized communities, right? It is very difficult. I do have a couple of people in my newsroom who are, and they came from ACJ also because ACJ does have a scholarship. It is not very easy. Also to, sometimes language is a barrier. Sometimes understanding, for example, a newsroom with all upper oppressor caste people, right? They don't understand certain things, the nuances of what that reporter is saying. So to make the entire newsroom understand, one small example I can tell you. A reporter was reporting something who's from an upper caste, oppressor caste, and the man tells, and he says in our editorial meeting, oh, he was playing the caste card. So a Dalit editor, his name is Sudipto, he is also from ACJ, he's I think perhaps one of the few Dalit editors in India, he said, caste is not a card for us, right? So then everybody else in the newsroom gets that perspective to not use these words and not say these things. So yes, it is difficult. There are many times people from marginalized communities, at least twice, they've come and told me, don't put me in reporting only about that. I don't want to be identified. Some want to be identified as reporting about the community. So I think it's also important to understand where each one's growth path is. What do they want to write about? Yeah, it is very difficult. You also asked about pay, right? Whether it becomes more difficult for marginalized communities, definitely. I'm not saying no at all.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you. This was an amazing, amazing session. I just want to talk about how many of you pointed out that at times certain stories become women issues and they're labeled for women to cover. I just have a follow-up question on that. That I want to ask that, have you ever been told that a particular story wasn't suitable for you to cover because of your gender? If so, how did you manage deal with that situation?
I think I mentioned the crime beat, just like Yogita was saying when I was in Delhi working as a reporter. If there's something that breaks late or, Delhi is surrounded by UP, Haryana, Punjab, there are things that happen constantly and sometimes you're sent off at very short notice. And I think every time there was a riot in Western UP, the male reporters would be sent. And I was always asking to go and was never allowed because they said, you will physically be in danger. And I said, that's a call I'd like to make, not you. So there have been a few cases, at least 2 or 3 times, where I've had arguments with my editor saying, I would like to make that decision for myself rather than you telling me if I'm going to be in danger. You give me all the information, and then I will decide if I still want to go. But I think oftentimes the decision is made for you by deputing the men, and they're already halfway to that place, and then you're told, sorry, sorry, we already chose to send them. So it has happened to me specifically when it comes to conflict or rioting or any kind of crime stories.
Yeah, actually in sports also, we used to, for example, this was when I was earlier working with IBN as well, and also when a little later too. You know, all these wrestling stories, when you have to go to the akhadas, they won't let you go there because, you know, it's such a male space and you can't enter that. Even once you go there, I think there also it gets a little difficult to even interact with some of them, and for them to open up. It's a little difficult. I mean, that space, yes, was something that, but you got to look past it. I think the point is, if you are okay with, you know, your standing, the way you interact, and if you're confident that you can get the best out of that person, allay their fears, and, you know, break that barrier of discomfort, it should. But yes, to try and kind of convince your bosses to make sure that, I think we need to be more confident and upfront whenever we are wanting to do a story. I think it comes from there.
But I now see this from the other side, wherein I am responsible also when I send a report on the ground. And I don't want, not because I feel it's dangerous, I don't want to send women reporters to these horrible, you know, like political party launches, etc., where just drunk men will come and grope you. I'm sorry, but there's no other nice way to put it. So I tell them, you know, your career is not going to go up because you covered a party launch. There'll be 100 other reporters covering it. Do something meaningful then. So, but if a reporter really fights with me and says, I want to go, I never say no. But I do, I mean, I have to think from the other side now, right? So I do tell them that it's not worth it. It's not just because it's unsafe. It is not even worth the risk that you take. But I would never say don't go for a conflict reporting.
Yes, sir. So, my name is Utkarsh, and whenever we speak of intersectionality, so let's say, for example, if someone wants to read about the lived experiences of queer individuals. Now, so whenever we speak of marginalized identities, what ends up happening is that you have to go to these alternate platforms. Let's say if I want to read about queer individuals, I will have to go to Queerbeat. But most of the mainstream publications...
Sorry, can you repeat that? You have to go to where?
Queerbeat, right? So most of the mainstream institutions will not carry those kind of stories. Is it only down to not having representation of, let's say, queer individuals in this organization, or also because they are afraid that, or not afraid, but that people are not going to read those stories?
No, I think the problem stems from lack of representation in the newsroom. I have a colleague, her name is Raga Malika. She is from the LGBTQ community, and she runs this inclusive newsroom plus inclusive fellowship. Raga has been part of our team for almost 8 years. She changed the language of our newsroom. For example, she told us how to cover, and she insists on those stories. She will make sure that it is covered and then in what way it is covered. So, you know, the way we look at stories, our language, our interpretation, everything changes when you have driving forces in the newsroom, right? It cannot be a junior person. That is why it is important that on the top level of your editorial, there are people like that, because then the language of the newsroom itself changes. For example, jilted lover. Simple word, right? There are still newspapers using that word, jilted lover. A particular newspaper in Chennai uses it even today. So I find it really problematic. But then there are women in the newsroom who tell you each time, you cannot use that. You cannot use that word, right? So language really changes, and your intent really changes when the representation in the newsroom is higher.
But I do want to add on to this, Dhanya. I mean, yes, this is right. This is one side of it. But we also have to look at the audience that's viewing stories. Your question is actually partly true. I mean, if we are looking at, as organizations, we are constantly reviewing the kind of stories we have to do, the kind of stories we have to put out. Why is it that certain stories are being viewed more than certain stories? There is a reason for that. I mean, we can't hide from that at all. We have to ask the men, are they watching stories that are women-centric? I don't think so. That's a fact. Numbers that we are at organizations, we look at numbers. We are seeing it. We keep pushing out women-centric stories, but why are they still viewed lesser than the male-centric stories?
Can I just also add, I'll give you an example of something I actually did in a story which was completely going against my first instinct, which was a story about women's education in Afghanistan. And similarly, because I do think, and we see the gender, like especially like for television, we can't tell, but at least on the website, you can actually tell if it's, who's actually looking at those stories. And I was like, oh, no, actually, maybe we need a man in this piece, because actually maybe they listen to him if they don't listen to the woman. So we actually there were obviously women in the piece, but we actually put a man in the piece who said, no, I want my daughter to be educated.
No, the hypocrisy of the Indian audience is really tremendous. As journalists, we have to be cognizant of it. For example, when a flood happens in Chennai city, 3 days everybody will read about environment and flooding and all that. Then the mangroves can go to wherever it wants, the forest can be deforested, nobody cares. They will all, my biggest grouse is when Facebook was in vogue, Meta was in vogue, people used to share these...
This is my cue to say thank you all for joining us.
Yeah. So, was in vogue, as in, I don't think for news is in vogue anymore, sorry. But people used to share these environment stories which look beautiful on their wall, but I know nobody's clicked it, right? At the same time, when I say Nayanthara is getting married, nobody's sharing it on their wall, but the click rate is so high. So I used to tell my newsroom that when manual scavengers die, it happens almost every week, we should put the headline as Infosys engineer falls and dies. So everybody will click it, but inside the story will be manual scavengers dead. That is the hypocrisy of the Indian reader. So we also have to be cognizant of that, which also drives the newsroom.
Okay, last 30 seconds.
But she's right. And that's also critical about how you evolve as journalists, right? Yes, we can all talk about what we're passionate about and how we want to tell our story, but how cleverly do you tell your story so that it reaches the people who you want to reach, right? Like what she said, that's what I do. I mean, I want to talk about Naomi Osaka, but I have to say, oh, what's the influence of this male basketball player in her life? What is the influence of, Kobe Bryant in Osaka's life? That'll be then viewed. It's a little, it's not pretty, but sometimes it's also about how can you dress your story so that the real story actually reaches. That's also essential part of your growth as journalists too.
We can go on, but we are at time. Thank you all for joining us. I'm really sorry. Thank you all for joining us. This has been an exciting panel discussion.
To start with, we'd like to thank everybody who turned up here today, and a great panel who shared a lot of good insights. There's often an old and unkind adage that goes that those who can do and those who can't teach. But ACJ is an institution that proves otherwise, because we've had a treasure trove of amazing teachers who we've been blessed with to have as faculty, who've not just shaped journalism through their own work, but helped shape the course of future generations of journalism through the way how they've molded us. And in fact, one of the things that stood out from what Aminul had said was about how it wasn't just his English that got better, but how Bindu ma'am had taught him how important compassion and kindness was in writing as well. And that's something which I believe is a key takeaway that we should have from the memory of Bindu ma'am in terms of not just how she taught us, but also in terms of what are the values that she wanted to instill in us as journalists who were entering into an industry. The panelists are shaping journalism today, but I truly believe that it's the work of countless teachers like Bindu ma'am which is shaping journalism in the format and the way it is today. We'd also like to take this opportunity to thank ACJ for giving us this wonderful platform to host this event, Sashi sir for always being supportive and encouraging us, Kalyan sir for all the effort that he's put in terms of guiding us and helping us pull this event off, Mr. Balaji for being here with us today, and of course the ACJ Alumni Association, Harsha and Ranjit, who've put in a lot of time and effort into making this event happen, and of course the other members as well, Anirudh, Manasa, Aminul, Brevati, Vrinda, all of them have taken a lot of time and effort to make this event happen. And I do hope that the rest of you who are watching this online do pitch in and help us with the other events that we've got planned and coming up as well. And thank you so much once again, everyone, for being here today.